All right. Thanks for joining us on Mindset, Motivation, and Mastery. It gets to talk to a super cool guy this morning, one of the best leaders I know, one of the best coaches I know. He runs a team, and we're just chatting offline, and he's grown his business, substantially over the last couple of years. He did a shift and ran his business. I'm lucky that I've gotten to know this guy over multiple years, and can definitely testify to the fact that he is an amazing leader. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I'm honored to be with you. I want to know, because I've known you for, like you said, several years, but how did they film you on that snowboard jump? I mean, you have some moves that,
I know. And I also had curly hair on the boat. I don't know if you noticed in the boat, there was
yeah,
the curly hair guy. That was me. Yeah. I just had curly hair, and then they filmed me jumping. Yeah, it was
these these
amazing.
these things. But I did see the other day you with your kids jumping into some water, and I'm like, that's the Jared I know.
See?
That's the dad. Follow me, kids. I'm gonna go cannonball before you.
Yeah. We call that cliff jumping, even though it's not really cliff jumping. It's just jumping off of one of the locks here in Canada that we're not supposed to do, but we do it because we're lucky we live in a small community, and it's like a little community thing that everybody comes down in the evenings after everything closes and they swim there. It's a pretty cool little area. So yeah, I've got to at least do it, right? Speed of the leader, speed of the pack. So
Yes.
if I want my kids to jump, I better jump. But I think I'm the only one that touches the bottom. Like I don't know if there's any. They're like, is there a bottom to this? Yes, I have touched it.
Well, like we'll probably talk about in our subject, the leader sometimes has to show the pace too. You think about the speed of the leader. The leader has to show how far we can go, how much we can do.
Yeah.
And you're probably coming up going, yeah, there's a bottom down there. Don't go that far.
Yeah, don't go that far because I found it. Yeah, no. So listen, again, one of the both you and I have, obviously we've studied this book. We studied the principles in the book. I think it was written by
It's,
Sean Covey. I automatically want to say Stephen Covey, but Sean
well,
Covey.
Sean Covey's name was on it, but Chris McChesney is really the author. He's the
Is he Chris
he's the
McChesney? Okay.
doer. He's the guy
Is he? Yeah.
that takes
So,
it all over the place. But yeah. So
yeah. Well, we've both studied and read the book, and the reason we have is one of the biggest challenges in coaching is obviously the fact that like everybody has all these big plans, right? Everyone has all these ideas, and some of I'm going to say the majority of people have no idea how to take those plans and ideas and start execution, right? So
yeah,
you talk about 40X all the time in from an
yeah.
execution perspective of taking these ideas and executing on that and taking action on it and understanding how to grow it and scale whatever we're doing, right? So
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The number one thing that we talk to team leaders about, because you and I coach more teams than we do individual agents.
yeah,
I guess this would apply to an individual agent, especially if you have an assistant. But the number one thing we talk to them about is getting above the whirlwind. You're never going to get out of the whirlwind, but
yeah,
the ability to I like to say, my goal is to get your head and your shoulders above the whirlwind. And that's by implementing the four disciplines of execution. But let's first start there. What's the whirlwind?
yeah,
It's the thing that at the end of the day that makes you go, I was so busy, I don't feel like I actually got anything done though. It's the
yeah,
whirlwind. In
yeah. Busy, and
leadership, it's
basically
that you got a minute.
yeah, busy is the enemy of greatness, right? Like getting stuck in that whirlwind or getting stuck in being always so busy that we're not being as productive as we need to be, right? And again,
hmm
I think so many people, so not just in real estate, but all across the board, right?
Yeah, all across the board. I think any business could take these four disciplines and apply them. And actually, I think that's the beautiful part about the four disciplines of execution is that the authors did this in the consulting space for years before they actually published the book. So it wasn't coming from a place of theory. It was coming from, we wrote it and then we practiced it, then we revised what we wrote, and here's where it's at, and it's gold.
Yeah,
So how do you want to tackle it? Because I think I have two ideas on implementing it into a team in terms of a sales team.
yeah,
The sales team is the easy one to implement it to. It's the support staff and the administrative staff that most leaders really struggle to implement 4DX and to consistently follow up on it. How do you want to
Well,
tackle that?
let's talk. I think let's talk about the support staff side of it,
Yeah.
because I think it's easy I think that's where most team leaders challenge, but it's not just team leaders. I think most agents get challenged. Matter of fact, I was on a call earlier this morning. That's what we were talking about. Is no matter whether you're a single agent or whether you're a team, one of the biggest struggles that we have is that support side of growing that business, and how do we, even like marketing plans, all of that sort of stuff. How do they get that rolling, moving forward, and create consistency in it, right? So I'd love to tackle it. So I'd love for you to share with, if you're coaching a team and you want to look at that support side and go, hey man, we need to really launch on that side so that it's smooth, it's easy, it happens. Like what are the steps? Maybe even
I love you and I heard this a couple weeks ago. It probably wasn't the first time that when you increase certainty, when you increase systems, you increase certainty.
Yeah.
And when you increase certainty, the confidence of whether it's the customer or the person on your team increases in your ability to lead them.
100%.
So if, systems is such a blasé word, it's like it's overused. You just got to implement systems. Well, the 4 disciplines of execution is a system that should be an overarching culture inside your organization. So let's just quickly go through them. Discipline number 1 is that you focus on the wildly important goal. It's the 1 or 2 things that you're going to do. The book talks about the law of diminishing return, that if you try to focus on too much, you actually get less done. Most real estate teams and agents don't have trouble coming up with their wildly important goal. It's usually a number of homes they're going to sell, amount of income, or sales volume that they need to do in order to achieve their goal. That's the focus. The second thing is that they act on the lead measure. And the lead measure is the things that really influence and predict the lag measure, which is the number of homes they're going to sell. The challenge is most organizations only focus consistently on how many homes did we sell last month? How many listings did we take last month? Instead of how many hours of prospecting, how many conversations, how many leads did we generate, how many appointments did we go on? That would be the influencer to this giant goal. That's the wig. I love this image. At the beginning of the year, if your goal is to make $1 million, it's this giant mountain, like this 2-ton boulder that's in the middle of your office and you can't move it. The lead measure is this picture of a wedge and a large rod that's going to be the lever that pulls down and starts to move that boulder forward. Over time, we tie these consistent lead measures together and we start to move the boulder. That's the acting on the lead measures. The third thing is to keep a compelling scoreboard. The scoreboard has to be visible. The scoreboard, I have to be able to look at it in 5 seconds or less and know whether or not you're winning, and myself if I'm on your team. And the scoreboard is something that we use to track the lead measures, not the 72 points of data that most CEOs look at that you've really got to be a student of to study where what things are where.
And a lot of those are lag measures.
And a lot of those are what they call pray measures. Like they open them up for the first part of the month. The author says, I hope and pray we did what we were supposed to. And that's the only influence they got.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is the number one discipline that should have led with, but you can't. And it ties all 3 of these together. The focus on the wildly important goal, the acting on the lead measure, and the compelling scoreboard are tied together with the 4th discipline, which is the cadence of accountability. And that is either a daily, hopefully not longer than weekly, cadence where you and your team are getting together and talking about what's on the scoreboard, how do we do on lead measures, what are you committed to do this next week to get back on track or to stay on track, and then what's 1 or 2 projects that you're working on that ultimately influence the wildly important goal, the number 1. So those are the 4. Now, most teams that are production in the sales side, it's easy to take the 4 disciplines of execution and implement it because most teams that are semi-sophisticated have one common CRM. They can typically see the number of conversations, the activity and lead generation of their team in one place. If not, that's where we have to work as coaches to get them to. If they have one common CRM, then we can help them with one common dashboard, scoreboard, to pull the lead measure data out to be able to see it. What they typically don't have, this is why I say it's easy because that's all they don't have, we just implement it, is they don't have a good, consistent cadence of accountability or a process for doing it, a process for how do we do our check-ins and our cadence of accountability. So that's what we have to work with on the sales side. But now when you pivot a leader, whether you're an individual agent or a team leader, and say, now let's implement 4DX with your support staff, what's their goal? Well, what things do they have to do on a daily basis that influence and can predict that goal? What would they scoreboard? I mean, most staff have checklists of listing management or transaction management or the task list, which is, most of those admins go, it changes by the minute because my leader calls me and says, can you do this? And so they're stuck in the whirlwind all day long. They're never able to rise above because everything keeps coming onto them. So which is the beauty of the 4DX system, when you can figure out how you implement it in non-sales centric staff member positions, you could figure it out anywhere.
Yeah.
So I had my former boss was a captain in the Army, amazing guy, and he gave me this analogy. You'd probably appreciate this, Jared, that is stuck with me to this day, and it was probably from 8, 9, 10 years ago. He said, most large brokerages, I ran a brokerage that was nearly 500 agents and 10 offices, and you've run large brokerages. He goes, most large brokerages have a home base. And then you have maybe branch offices, or you have 100, 200 agents in that office. But the way that you have to look at the agents or the branch offices is they're on the front line. And your job in home base, or the corporate office, as many companies call it, is to support, feed, uplift, give everything that front line needs to be able to do their job. And when I got that in the framework of 4DX, I went, holy cow, the number one job of an admin person is technically a battle that helps them win the war of the wildly important goal. Like, if they could focus on, your job is not to sell the 300 homes that the team has as a goal. Your job is to win the daily battles that helps them win their war. So what does that look like? How do you do that? In such a way that you could influence and predict that if I do these things, they'll win the war.
Yeah.
And so in all of my experimentation with this, here's what I've come up with that's worked. If you're going to implement 4 disciplines of execution, the hardest part about it is picking the accurate lead measures. If you're a super large brokerage, whether you're 1,000 agents plus, or you're a 40 agent team or a 10 agent team, I've found that the number one lead measure to track, there's all kinds of lead measures you could track, but the number one influenceable and predictable lead measure is appointments. And it's not appointments like I set them, it's appointments that you've gone on.
So just let me just take one step back, just so that I can, the support staff's wildly important goal would mirror the image of the team's wildly important goal. Is that what I'm hearing you say? They wouldn't have their own wildly important goal, but the team's wildly important goal might be to, I don't know, close 450 transactions a year. It may be whatever GCI goal is. So that's the staff's wildly important goal as well?
No. So the staff is going to obviously adopt what the overall team is in the macro WIG, wildly important goal. Yep. But if you're going to empower a staff to have a really good lag measure, they're going to end up having more short-term battles.
Yeah.
Now, I think it also depends on what staff we're talking about. Like, some of the teams that we coach have staff that's just responsible for finance. Well, let's focus on the WIG by controlling our expenses. And that staff is going to have some sort of measurable goal to move the expenses or hedge the expenses to be controllable. The transaction coordinating, though, the marketing, the listing coordination, that's where it starts to get really challenging.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
And you
What
look
is that?
at what one of the things that I've seen a lot of my clients do in that regard is they start developing short-term 90-day, 60-day, even 1 month battles that move them towards operational efficiency, operational excellence, some people call it. Like, what can we do to really level up our ability to produce at that level? One team that you and I know very well, Kyle Whistle in San Diego, they're going through this process of stripping every system and asking themselves, if we were to start over completely on every single system that we run, would they look like they do right now? And I'm like, that is, first of all, it's very healthy. Second of all, it's very scary.
Yeah.
But so here's where you could take 4DX. If you could figure out what I love about the transaction coordinator and listing coordinator support staff, again, their job is to support the front line. Their job is to keep the agents in the highest and best use of their time, going on appointments and writing things up. Well, what would their lead measures be? Like, if their lag measures are different projects that need to be finished, or we're implementing Sisu, or we're switching to this CRM, or we've got to clean up our database. Those are like lag measure wigs. What are
Yeah.
the
Like
things that they could do daily?
yeah, we
What
have
would
one
they
of the
do?
lag measures. Like on one of our teams, we have one of our lag measures of reviews. How many reviews that we're getting on Google? How many like all of that sort of stuff. Like that's one of their lag measures. But what's like you're talking about? Like, what's the lead measure to get to that?
So it's really interesting that you picked that, because I think it's a high quality lag measure that is so synonymous for the prey measure. How do you know you did well? It's too late. You can't influence it
Yeah,
anymore because it's already done.
it's done. Yeah,
So when you're asking yourself, if you're thinking about implementing this, what are the things that my staff could do daily and weekly that we can track on a scoreboard that I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt it influences and predicts 5-star reviews? Here's what I've come up with. And by the way, you have to allow your staff to work through this. You can't feed them the answer. You have to allow them to say, hey, I want you to figure out what are the measurable, predictable, influenceable activities that if we tracked them, they should be able to determine how many 5-star reviews we're going to get.
right.
And here's what some of the best teams, admins that I coach have come up with. 100% of the checklist followed with 0 errors. So it begs the question. So let me say it again. 100% of the checklist followed, 0 errors. So it begs the question, how good's your checklist? Now all of a sudden we have another short-term wig. We got to clean up our listing checklist. We got to clean up our buyer checklist. We got to clean up our post-close checklist. Now we got some really cool battles that we could work on that will influence it. But meanwhile, the lead measure is still the same. Every checklist 100% followed, 0 errors. So the leader goes, well, how do I measure that? In the beginning, daily. Daily. And you have to create this culture, this cadence of accountability that says we're okay admitting to our errors. When I first got into leadership at my former company, we had an ancillary business that only a unique product in California called natural hazard reports. And this product was being assembled manually, literally by college students who would come in part-time and assemble. There was 6 different data points that they would grab the data from to put into a report to hand over to a seller. They were terrible at operational efficiency, terrible in terms of the number of reports going through. And so we implemented 4DX. We tracked the number of reports created per person per week and the number of errors created by each person. Now, the errors were easy to find because we had a quality control person, one person, that's all they were responsible for doing, because you couldn't have a $99 report going out to a consumer and getting sued on an error. The monies just didn't make sense. You better make sure that report's right, because it's not worth getting sued for thousands of dollars for a $100 report. So that quality control person would find the errors. We would obviously know the per person productivity, but the number one thing that happened is they saw their scoreboard and nobody wanted a 0 and everybody wanted a higher number on their reports. Productivity went through the roof. We implemented better systems and ultimately found a partner who could automate a lot of what we were doing.
Yeah.
It was my first experience in going, this works, and the second experience in going, this is how it works at an admin level.
Well, and it's I mean, the scoreboarding piece of that is again, it's a healthy, in my opinion, it's a healthy way of accountability, right? Because nobody wants to be wrong, and nobody
Right.
wants, like, so no one wants to be wrong. So going to people and saying, hey, you're wrong, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, like, that's a tough piece for accountability. What scoreboarding allows is it's the gentle piece to accountability, because nobody wants to be last on that board, and the scoreboard is only in relation to their activities, only in relation to what they're doing. So no one wants to be last. Everybody
Yep.
wants to be first, right? So it's an easy way, it's an easy conversation into discipline 4, which is then the accountability, right?
Well, and if the employee can understand that it's not you versus them, it's you versus you. We're not scoreboarding so that you could get beat by 75% of the other staff. I want you to have some measurable goals and improvements, like these stages that you want to improve through, and I'm going to reward you for doing that.
Yeah.
In an admin person, if you scoreboard properly, you should have their name, their goals, anything else about the static information that's not going to change in black on the scoreboard. Then their results, as you track whether it's daily or weekly, let the results be in a color. I like to use red or green. Red is you didn't meet your goal. Green is you met it or you exceeded it. So in 5 seconds or less, I can look at the scoreboard. If I see a bunch of green, you're winning. If I see a bunch of red, what are our opportunities for improvement?
What's happening? Yeah.
Easy way to scoreboard. So
Love it.
how do you do a cadence of accountability as a leader with your admins, where you're trying to track 100% of the checklist being followed with 0 errors? Here's the number one challenge. So many times employees are afraid to talk about the mistakes they made. I mean, think about it.
Yep.
Boss, I got to admit that I totally dropped the ball on the disclosures on that one document, on that one file.
Yeah.
They're afraid of getting fired.
Sure.
So you have to find somebody willing to go first to show that it's safe. It's as simple as that. It cannot be the CEO person, team leader, doing that oversight. It is best when it's the employees holding each other accountable to what's on the scoreboard. So, for example, one team that I coach has a product called Brokerment that they use for their transaction management. And I'm not advocating Brokerment. It just, whether it's SkySlope, Dotloop, Brokerment, et cetera, it's just a product that's out there. You could use Asana. You could use another project management tool. It doesn't have to be a real estate specific transaction management tool. They all have checklists, and they have what's due today and what's upcoming. It's also what's past due. So their goal is to have 0 past due and to have some real clarity on what's due today. So if I was leading you on this and you were the admin, Jared, I would say, hey, Jared, you know what to say. How'd you do today? And you take it from there. Yeah. It's not, hey, Jared, I noticed you didn't finish these things. No. Cadence of accountability, the leader doesn't talk much.
Yeah, it's taking responsibility. If you can get them to take responsibility. Yep.
Hey, yesterday I got almost all my tasks completed except for 2. I had an issue with this one. I forgot to do this, but I'm going to make up for it today, and today I'm going to knock all these tasks out that I have in front of me. Now, a couple things happen when those kinds of cadences take place. First of all, they're fast. If you do them right, you should not take more than 10 to 15 minutes. But second of all, the leader on the other end of the call is empowered. Like, how many times do we coach a leader who at the end of the whirlwind of a day, they're going, I'm so defeated. I don't know what's going on. I'm so disconnected from my staff. It's a simple fix. Cadence of accountability daily until you guys get that cadence down and the staff is doing it with each other. You're on it. You're just listening. They're going to run it if they do it well.
Yeah. John Maxwell says, to inspect what you expect. And if you don't inspect what you expect, then you don't get to expect, right? Like, and that's the reality, right? And so people go, well, man, I don't want to spend all day, in accountability meetings or all this stuff. Well, you can't get people to move forward. You can't, get people to leverage what you need them to leverage if you don't help them get there. And like you said, it's not a long time. It can be very quick and very easy.
So I love that. And let me just bookend that whole admin piece with what Tom Ferry has done in 4 disciplines of execution. If you remember this, he added a 5th. And I know we don't really make a big deal out of it because 4DX is proprietary, but his 5th is don't forget to celebrate their wins.
Celebrate their wins, yeah.
And when an admin staff can bring in, 7 5-star reviews, leadership is going to focus on the 1 or 2 non 5-star reviews. It's a problem. It's a mistake. But when you can show the admins and you can have a party or some sort of a, verbal celebration every single month on the lag measures that they won, you've got them connected to 4DX works to the results.
Yeah.
But the mistake that leaders make is they'll only focus on the mistakes that the staff is making, the errors and the lead measures and that kind of stuff, and they forget about discipline number 1. We're focusing on the wins. We're focusing on the things that we're doing, the battles that they're doing to win the war, and we quickly go on to the next battle. We quickly go on to the next project, and we don't take the time to celebrate them, which helps them make this psychological connection of, when I do this, it works.
Yeah, and so the biggest challenge, like for me, that's one of my biggest challenges, right? Is because I don't need anyone to celebrate my wins for me to move forward. It's just my personality. However, a lot of leaders are like, yourself, myself, I know you're more of an analytical, like we don't need that. But what's different is typical operational side of a business, like they thrive on that. They always want to be recognized. And we have a challenge with that. So like some of my teams, we actually have a whole rule during the week that they have to acknowledge, 2 or 3 of their team members, even publicly, for the wins that they do, because it's easy for us to forget that. For some reason, it's easy for us to go, hey, like you did 8 of the 10 things you were supposed to do. What's wrong with the other 2? Rather than go, hey man, way to go on those 8. And it's so discouraging for our operational side of our business. And it's easy for us to make that happen. So listen, go ahead.
I was going to say the last thing I'll say is this. I think the beauty of the 4DX system is it allows you to vet the right staff.
Yeah.
It allows you to figure out, do I have the right person working? Is it the leader or is it the staff person? But when you can train them to do the second discipline, the lead measures, and you have the cadence of accountability, you have the scoreboard working, and you have the wildly important goal, and they're going after battles that win it, and they're still not putting the numbers up, or their errors are through the roof, you probably have a bad hire. Yeah. It's a lot easier to see than something subjective. I don't feel like they're working. They're never available. They don't respond to me. Well, what does the scoreboard say?
Yeah. And everybody wants to be a part of something. Right. Like, so, and what I love the 4 disciplines of execution for is, some people join teams, and what this does is it gives us the framework of culture. Like, and because a lot of people, my opinion, a lot of people use the word culture and go, oh, it's all about fun and it's all about this. And I believe that culture is just how we do it around here. Like that's what it's supposed to be. And what I love about the 4 disciplines, even Tom's 5th discipline, but the 4 disciplines, is that it gives us framework around creating a culture of productivity. And we're in business and we need to create a culture of productivity, right? So this creates that structure. This creates that focus, getting them, if we want extraordinary results, we need to be super clear on what matters most, right? So we need to get super clear on what's our wildly important goal. And it's so easy for us to, that as team leaders or, anybody, is we create this wildly important goal, and you use the example of the boulder, and then we put the boulder in the middle of the room and we just leave it there. Yeah. Like, and it's just left, right? And so,
or worse yet, the boulder over time starts blending into the aesthetics of the room and we forget about it.
Well, I was about to say, and before we know, we walk around this boulder and we don't even know what's in the room, right? We don't even know what's in the room, right? And so yeah, that's exactly the struggle, right? Rather than getting it out in front and going, hey, this is what we need to do, and then really tying it down into some metrics, like way more analytical than I am. Sometimes I dream of being as analytical as Andy. Well,
I'm never accused of being analytical in
well,
my world.
well, I was gonna say, like, because I think you're the perfect amount. Like, you're not crazy analytical, but you're really
No.
good at looking at everything in a way that is all about, because like numbers is business, right? So I've had to learn to really look at all of these four
Yeah.
disciplines as a man. Numbers are our business. Like, numbers are what tells us where we are, and really drill down to that, right? So, and then how do we leverage? Like, what are the key pieces of leverage, right? In order for us to move anything, the big boulder, we need some leverage and get clear on what it is we're doing. And if everybody plays their role really well, we can move that boulder really easily. But if people don't, right? If people don't, then it makes things so much more difficult, right? And then, ultimately, in engagement, right? When we look at that scoreboard, helps us realize our level of engagement.
Nobody likes to play a game unless they know the score.
Like, yeah, like I always use the example. Can you imagine if you went to a football game and they never had a scoreboard up, and no one ever knew what the score was? How exciting would that be?
See,
Matter of fact,
I thought being in Canada, you would use an example of ice fishing or something like that.
okay, well, that's the problem with ice fishing. There's no scoreboard. If they had
That's
a
why it's so
scoreboard,
boring.
that's why it's so boring, because they don't. Like, no one knows. Like, if they had a scoreboard that drove up and down the lake and go, "Hey, Sarah just caught 5 fish," it would probably be exciting. But
Your phone alerts with the score update.
I was gonna say, maybe we should create an app, Andy, called Ice Fishing to the Extreme, and people, to get on it, we create a scoreboard for ice fishing. But maybe I should have used hockey. It's the same thing. Hockey's exciting, or football is exciting
Yeah.
when we know the score, and when the score is close, because nobody wants to lose. We all want to win, right? So it makes the game really exciting.
Yeah.
But let's even use that analogy as a football or hockey or whatever. If they lose, then they go back and they go, what do we need to do? What do we need to change? How do we make this better? What do we got to do? Right. So then we get to the last part of the discipline of accountability. Is accountability isn't a dirty word. It's not a scary word. It's just about, number one, if on the scoreboard you're number one, how do you stay there? How do you get better? What do you get better at? If you're the last on the scoreboard, how do you slowly move up? And our job as leaders is to help people do that. So when we talk about that whole framework of a team or culture, like, whether they like it or not, when someone comes to join a team, or an agent comes to a company, or comes whatever, they want and need that level of structure, commitment, engagement with them, because that's why they're there, right? So I love the whole 4 disciplines of execution as creating a framework around how we do it around here. This is what it looks like, right? So
there's a really interesting thing that you said, that it's like the benefit of it for a leader. Implementing 4DX allows them to feel you're never going to get completely out of the whirlwind. It's always going to be there because that's business, but allows you to feel like at least your head and shoulders are above the whirlwind, and you have a sense of like, what's the word? Not engagement, but empowerment. Like, you really know like, the shit's not hitting the fan with my TC because I know exactly where they're at on their checklists.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, what it does for the staff person in this example is it allows them to avoid practical drift. And the practical drift is coming from the flying industry. The pilot, if the pilot doesn't keep checking in with the towers to know what heading they need to be on, and they're off by a couple of degrees, over time, you don't have a cadence of accountability. Over time, you're way off course.
Yeah.
Avoid practical drift by a daily or weekly cadence of accountability, so we can make sure our corrections are minor, not these giant, we're going to have to let you go because we're this far off.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't them. It was the absence of cadence of accountability.
Yeah. And we're too far gone to make that correction with that person, system, whatever we want to call it, that it needs to be done. So awesome. If there's anything for someone to really jump into this, what would you say that they need to do to get started with this sort of framework for their company, team, whatever?
Yeah. So number one, I would say you've really got to know your wig.
Yeah.
And your wig has got to be something that inspires you. It's got to be really wildly important. Number two, your team needs to know your wig. Like, what was the last time that you resold the vision that you have for this year's goal? Where are you going? Do they have buy-in? And then number three, you have to ask them, what could you do to help us get there? The easiest thing you could do to teach 4DX to be able to step into it is the author has created, I think it's like 16-minute YouTube video. Just search it, 4 Disciplines of Execution, and know that it's the author and it's the longer version, not the 5-minute version. It's excellent. He's the best one at explaining it, and then go from there. Read the book, go deeper if you want to go deeper on it, or reach out to one of us and we'll see what we can do to help you and support you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, my friend. Listen, I really appreciate you taking time today. I know you're a busy guy, and I really appreciate you jumping on here to share your wisdom with our audience and the people that watch. So thank you very much. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to either follow you or get in touch
I
with
kept
you?
my email about as dumb as it possibly could be. It's my name, Andy@Nazaroff.com. If you want to reach out to me that way, you can look me up on Facebook or Instagram just by my name as well. It's a pretty uncommon name. And I'd love to connect. So, Jared, thank you, by the way. Thanks for asking me, because I get inspired when you speak on something that you implement. It inspires you to get better at it. So you did that for me this morning.
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, for me, like, this show is really about putting out there to help people see the bigger picture so that they can always take that one step to get better and to kind of take their life, business in that next level. So, all right, my friend, I appreciate you. And I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.